and tell us this, and we started learning all the abbreviations and what they, what they mean,
Right.
because if you just read it, it's like, what are you talking about?
Mhm. Okay. Good morning. We are finishing up chapter 37, although we have one more class left for chapter 37, but it'll have to wait 2 weeks. And that really will conclude this, sort of section in Tanya that we're dealing with. Okay, I want to tell you two stories of wealthy people that came to a rabbi. One asked the rabbi, "What's the minimum amount I should be giving to charity?" Now, 10% we have to give, but he was wealthy. He was able to afford more than that. What's the minimum he should give? So the rabbi surprised him and said, "Nothing to do with amounts." His question was, "How much?" That he said, when it starts hurting you, then you know you've given enough. When it starts to bother you, then you know you've given enough.
There's an expression, give till it hurts.
Till it hurts. Sorry.
Be careful, your cup is smashed a little bit on one side.
Oh,
Something will fall.
it's already like the fourth cup of tea I've had in here. So far, no spills. So.
Okay.
But thank you for pointing it out. Another Jew came to the rabbi and asked the rabbi. He was getting into a big business deal, and he wanted the rabbi's advice. Should he take the deal or not? A blessing. So the rabbi asked him, "What are you willing to give me for the deal?" So he was thinking, like, should I offer a percentage, a certain amount? He wasn't sure. He's like, whatever the rabbi wants. So he said, "Okay, I want you to give me 100 pages of Talmud." He said, whatever the rabbi wants. 100 pages of Talmud before the next time we meet.
Oh boy.
Today, we're going to be talking about perhaps one of the most spoken about aspects in life, and that is money. In Hebrew, the word for money, there are a few words that are used for money. One is kesef, which can also mean silver, but is also used as money. Then there's damim, which can mean blood, but it's also used as money. And kesef in Hebrew also means a desire, love, like you love something, kisufin. Many people judge other people based on money. Many people judge themselves based on money. We want people that have money or that are able to give us money. That's kesef. We give our lives for money. So it's probably the single most focused on element of anyone's life is money in a direct or indirect way. Why? Why does money have such a power? And is there any positive side to the coin? Is there any positive side to money? So one of the things in life you want is to know what to focus on. There are many things in our lives that we have to deal with. We have to deal with relationships, right? We have to deal with work. We have to deal with our own personal growth, physical, material, physical, spiritual, etc. There are many different areas in life we have to focus on. What should I spend most of my time on? What should I spend most of my energy on? So over the last few months, we've been talking about our purpose in life, our purpose in creation, what God wants of us. When you know your purpose in life, it's much easier to then determine how much time should I allocate towards any of my endeavors, right? When you decide for the next week, my purpose is to enjoy vacation in a week from now. So the next week, I am going to do everything I can that I shouldn't have anything on my mind the week after, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't make the same choice the week I come back from vacation, right? Because once I have a purpose, now I could focus. So that's one. You can also turn the coin. If you want to know what someone's purpose is, you could look. What do they focus their time on? Now, unfortunately, most people focus their time on things that aren't necessarily their purpose because they don't think about it. So this is a good way if you want to get someone to think about something more purposeful. You ask them, oh, it seems like your purpose in life is to make another buck because that's what you're spending all your focus on. They may feel horrified to hear that and realize, oh, wait, maybe I should shift something maybe I should spend more time with my family. You know, if your spouse or your kids ever told you that. They tell the story of a kid that once asked his father, it came to his father before his birthday. His father asked him, what does he want for a gift? So he said, he pulled out from his wallet, he pulled out like $30. And he said, I'd like to spend a half hour with you. That's what he wanted for his birthday. His father was never around. His father wanted to make another buck. So he wanted to buy a half hour of his time. It's an unfortunate joke. I doubt it ever happened, but so if you want to see what a person's purpose is, look at what they spend their time on. On the other hand, if a person wants to know what to spend their time on, figure out what your purpose is. Then you'll know what to spend your time on, right? So now, when we want to think about what's God's purpose in all of existence, what's God's purpose in my existence, the way to figure out what the purpose is to look, what does God focus on? What is his emphasis on? Then you'll know what he wants. Yeah. So, for example, if you look in the Torah, almost half of the book of Exodus is about the construction of the temple. Almost all the book of Leviticus is about the service in the temple. It seems like the service in the temple is quite an important part of what God wants us to do in this world. Now, today we don't have a temple, but you get the idea so we have 613 commandments. Are there any mitzvahs that are sort of more encompassing or more, not important, but more important to the mission and focus in life than others? So there are two mitzvahs about which it's said by our sages in the Talmud and the Mishnah that they are, although it could be it says it about a few more, but two that are general, that they are general mitzvahs. One is the mitzvah of tzedakah. It says the mitzvah of tzedakah is equal to all the other mitzvahs. To the point that whenever our sages said mitzvah without qualifying which mitzvah, the assumption is it means tzedakah. So if the rabbi would say, come, let's do a mitzvah, everyone knew what that meant. Let's do some tzedakah. Yeah? Mm-hmm. The other is Torah, but we'll deal with that soon, a little later. So this seems a bit perplexing because if I gave you a list of mitzvahs, let's say tefillin, Torah, mezuzah, Shabbos, Yom Kippur, tzedakah, which one would you say is more divine, spiritual, Jewish?
Tefillin.
Tefillin.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. So tefillin is an object that has God's name written on it. Yom Kippur is a day that has a divine element to it. Torah, mezuzah, and then Shabbos. These are all things that are divine. They're holy. They're sacred. What's sacred about tzedakah? It's money.
Makes the others possible.
Tzedakah or money?
Well,
okay, but what's sacred about? But it makes it possible. But does that make it sacred? Would you say that then the mitzvah of tzedakah becomes greater than the mitzvah of Yom Kippur or tefillin or a Torah scroll?
Well, when we talk about tzedakah, usually the first thing we think of is charitable donation along those lines. But the essence of the word really is justice.
Right.
Right. And so we connect giving money and charity with something that is just and is the right thing to do. And
Correct.
that's the
Well,
short.
So you can say that the reason tzedakah is so important isn't really connected to the money or to what I'm doing. It's the effect. The fact that there's someone that's starving in the street and I'm giving them life, that's what makes it, because now you're right. Human being is a Torah scroll, is a created in the image of God. So because you're giving tzedakah, you are now sustaining life. This is the greatest mitzvah possible. That would be a valid sort of answer. It says that Maimonides says there has never been a Jewish community that didn't have a tzedakah fund. It doesn't exist. One of the two things that are sort of the DNA. There are three things that it says that if a Jew doesn't have one of those three things, you have to question his lineage, not practically, but it's a reason to question the lineage. By shonim, like literally means embarrassed, but like shameful, they're bashful. Rachmanim, compassionate. V'gom lechasadim, and perform acts of kindness. If a Jew doesn't do any of those three things, who knows? However, the problem with this is a lot of tzedakah isn't necessarily going to a poor person. A lot of people give tzedakah to Chabad. Most of it doesn't go to feed hungry people physically. Spiritually, yes, but not physically. So to say, and it's the same tzedakah, so to say that, or to educational organizations or other, so to say that tzedakah has this quality because it's feeding the poor can't be true. Can't be the whole story. Also, it's hard to say that tzedakah is equal to every other mitzvah, and it has nothing to do with the money or with your action. So in other words, the reason we're saying that tzedakah is so important is because it feeds someone else. So you're saying the most important mitzvah has nothing to do with anything that it's not about what I did. So much so that if I lose money and a poor person picks it up and feeds himself with it, I did the mitzvah of tzedakah, even though I don't know what I did, because my money fed someone. It's hard to say that mitzvah is greater than me fasting on Yom Kippur. It's hard to say that, right?
Yeah.
But after everything you've learned the last couple months, it should be quite obvious. What's the whole purpose of creation?
To make a home provision.
Down here in the lowest world, that we discussed chapter 36. In this whole chapter, we've been discussing how we do this through doing a mitzvah. The hand that does the mitzvah, the eyes, the mind, even the mouth that speaks the mitzvah. We all become invested in the mitzvah. This makes us a dwelling place for God, and we in turn make the world a dwelling place for God. And this happens through any mitzvah. So you want to make the biggest dwelling place for God, you got to go to the lowest thing possible, to the most physical thing possible, to the most material thing possible. So every other mitzvah we do elevates a certain part of us. Money is everything. I invest my whole life. Every part of my body is invested in the work I do, which makes the money. I could use the money to buy food that would nourish every part of me. And I'm giving that money to God or to a godly cause. So now I've taken my whole entity and made it a dwelling place for God. That can only be accomplished with money. When I shake the lulav, I'm using my hands. When I put on tefillin, maybe my mind and my heart, my hands. When you give money, you're giving yourself. You're giving a piece of your life. We'll dig into that a little deeper in a moment, but first let's read a little bit inside. So in other words, till now we thought if we wanted to look for the most important mitzvah, we were looking for the most spiritual mitzvah. But really, if the purpose of everything is to make the physical world a dwelling place, you want to know the most important mitzvah, look for the most physical mitzvah.
See, never thought of that before.
Why would you think like that? A human wants to go out of themselves. We want to become spiritual. But then if we really love God, we don't want to do what we want. We want to do what he wants. And what does God want? God wants to become physical. Not become physical
Right.
But God wants to enter the physical. He wants us to make the physical. So now we have to focus on what he wants. It's like buying flowers for your wife when you don't take care of her flowers, right? You do it because she wants it. Okay. Page 515. We're at 27 Adar. In light of the above, what was the above? where it was explained that the distinctive quality of the active mitzvot lies in their elevating effect on the body and vital soul, because they can elevate the body and vital soul because you're doing an activity. We can understand why our sages so greatly extol the virtue of charity, declaring it equal to all the other mitzvot together. In all of the Jerusalem Talmud, charity is called simply the commandment. For such was the idiomatic expression commonly used to refer to charity, the commandment. Why? Because charity is the core of all the mitzvahs of action and surpasses them all. Why? For the purpose of all these mitzvot is only why do we do a mitzvah? To elevate one's animal soul to God, since it is this vital soul that performs them and clothes itself in them. So if we want to elevate the body, we need the animal soul. So the purpose of the mitzvah is to elevate the animal soul in the body so as to be absorbed into the blessed Ein Sof light clothed in them. Now you will find no other mitzvah in which the vital soul is clothed to the same extent as in the mitzvah of charity. Before we understand why, they tell the story of a certain rabbi tzaddik that Purim morning he was seen polishing his coins. They asked him, "Why are you polishing your money?" So he said, "I don't care for money, but and Purim is a mitzvah to give tzedakah. I want to do the mitzvah, so I have to start appreciate. I need to get some. To me, giving tzedakah is like it's like just giving away the money. I don't feel like I'm giving. I don't think like I'm doing anything. I want to feel like I'm doing the mitzvah, so I have to gain an appreciation for the money." So he was sitting and polishing the money, trying to connect to the money. That's not normal, right? Okay. So now that we know that tzedakah takes a, I'm sorry.
When we do tzedakah, we do not say a prayer.
Very good. Did we just discuss this recently?
We talked a little bit about it before.
So there's a few reasons we don't make a bracha on tzedakah. One is because there's no limit. When do you make the bracha? Is there a limit? When are you finished? Anyhow, there are a number of reasons why we don't make a bracha on tzedakah.
But you
Okay.
make a bracha on wine.
Yeah, well, wine, that's a different thing. You're enjoying something from the physical world. Before you enjoy something, you have to make a bracha. Now, if someone receives a very large inheritance, truth is not even a large inheritance. It says, actually, this is out of context, but when someone's father passes away, we say a bracha dayan ha'emet, who's the true judge. You also make a shehachiyanu, because in all likelihood you got an inheritance. And if you have brothers, you say hatov v'hameitiv, because not only you got an inheritance, you have siblings that did too. So there are scenarios in which we do make a blessing associated with money. But the mitzvah of tzedakah, most mitzvahs we make a blessing. Tzedakah is one of the mitzvahs. There are a number of other mitzvahs we don't make a blessing on. Tzedakah is one of them. Yeah, but prayer, we don't make a blessing on prayer, even though it's a mitzvah, right?
For prayer is a lot of times making a blessing.
Yeah, but we don't make a blessing that God sanctified.
Blessing.
Like you make a blessing when you wash your hands, when you light
Yeah.
the candles.
Right when the last book being very come around being.
Oh, so before you learn Torah, we make a blessing. Sure. We say the morning blessings.
Right.
Yes.
If once or twice we did it here too, or JLI. Anyhow, there's room to do it. In other words, before when I put on tefillin with people, a lot of times I'll have them say the blessing, because before you say Shema, you're reading verses of Torah. You should say a blessing on the Torah. Sure,
Okay.
make a blessing on Torah.
They're making such an emphasis on tzedakah, but
Blessing is rabbinic. The whole concept of, not the whole concept. The blessing is in the Torah because the grace after meals is biblical. But the language of the blessings and the fact that we make blessings on mitzvahs or before we eat is rabbinic. In other words, it came about later. So, and it doesn't make it less important. Okay, I'm not trying to minimize the importance. I'm just saying that the fact that the Torah would value one thing over the other that won't necessarily reflect itself in the blessings, because when the rabbis came and attached blessings, there were certain things they couldn't attach a blessing to, not because they didn't want to. I'm sure they wanted tzedakah to have a blessing. There's just technical reasons that make it impractical, because you might be saying a blessing in vain. But when you put $1 in the tzedakah box, is that considered when you do the mitzvah, or when you give it to the poor person in his hand?
Okay, so you don't know when the mitzvah
Or when you get your paycheck,
Right.
you know,
So,
and you mentally say, okay, 10% is gonna go here, do you say it then? So it's,
but even if you'll say it, you do it during the action. But which action? When you give it to the collector that's at your door, or when it gets to the poor? There's so many variables. There's so many variables that it makes it difficult to pinpoint when to make the bracha.
But it's surprising then that you do a blessing when you were given inheritance.
But that's not a blessing of a mitzvah. That's a blessing. It says whenever you enjoy something in this world, you shouldn't enjoy it until you make until you thank God for it. That's why we make a blessing before we eat.
Oh.
It's like stealing. You're taking something that belongs to God. God created it. Before you enjoy it, be grateful and thank God for creating it and for allowing you to have it. So that's a different type. There are two types of blessings. There's birchas hanehnin, blessings of enjoyment, like the blessings on food, the blessing you make when you smell something, etc. And then there's blessings of mitzvahs. There's another type of blessing, which is when you see like thunder, lightning, and these types of things.
Rainbow.
Right. Well, right. So some of them are blessings of enjoyment, and not all of them are. So okay. Okay. They say every coin has two sides to it, right?
yeah.
Okay. So there are two sides to money. One side is the effort that goes into getting the money, right? We don't, most of us, and most of the time, don't receive money for nothing. We work for it. Some work physical labor, some work mental labor, some work emotional labor. We invest a lot in the money that we make. So money isn't just money. Money is the expression of our life, of our essence. And therefore, there are many laws that pertain to the importance of money. It says when you steal money from someone, it's like you're stealing their life. There's a very big prohibition, if you're an employer, not to pay an employee on time. The verse seems to say that you're taking their soul if you don't pay an employee on time when you told them. So if you told them you're going to pay them by day, if the sun sets and you didn't pay, you violated a negative commandment. Negative commandment. One of the 613 negative commandments is, one of the 613 commandments is not to let the person's pay sleep overnight. Okay? So once, now again, this is assuming you specified a day that they will get the pay. The problem is not all money is a result of effort. So we can't say that this is true for every dollar every person has. Many people have their money because they inherited it, or it was gifted to them, or some of their money may have been gifted to them or inherited to them. Someone may have won the lottery. Someone may have gotten married into money, etc. So when we want to categorize what money is, so there are two sides to the coin. There's the money, which is, let's say, 50% or more than 50% that's earned. And this part of the coin is where your soul is, the money that represents the person's life and blood and then their soul. And then there's the money that came to the person. Now, you'll notice, again, for most people, except if someone is by nature such, most people will have a much easier time spending money that they got than money that they earned. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you
didn't do any work for it.
I'll give you a simple example that happens to every person every year. Most people, I shouldn't say most people, many people get a tax return at the end of the year. I don't know what anyone does besides me. Although I do know because you hear what people advise people to do with their tax return. What's the advice to do with your tax return?
Reinvest.
Invest it. Do most people invest it? No.
Spend it.
What do most people spend their tax return money on?
Lavish things sometimes.
Most people that are able to afford life and don't need the tax return to supplement their food and clothing, most people will use that money for something extra, for something special. Why? If you want something special, why not use your paycheck? You have money sitting in the bank. If you want this cruise, why do you need to wait for your tax return? You've got more than enough money sitting in your savings account.
Different.
Why is it? What's the difference?
It's almost like that money is just free money.
It's exactly. So there's a big difference between the way we treat these two monies, right? However, is there a difference at the end of the day of what these monies can buy?
No.
No. At the end of the day, the person who won the lottery can use the money wisely and only spend it on necessities. The person who makes a lot of money can spend the money that he makes on nothing, on waste it and throw it away. Okay? At the end of the day, it's my choice of what I do with the money. Okay? So on one side of the coin, we have what went into the money. On the other side of the coin, we have what can the money be used for? How does it go out?
You know, it's sort of true on that whole situation, because I remember when I was working, I would get a bonus at the end of the year. That's where I made most of my donations.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, when I got that bonus, I gave a certain percentage of the bonus. But I did give during the year, but
Sure.
my big thing was when I got the bonus, because I didn't need that to live on.
Right.
So
So now the person that wins the lottery or gets an inheritance, does he have an easier time spending his money than the person who earned it? Perhaps. Not necessarily, but perhaps. But even if he has an easier time, does that mean that it doesn't cost him anything to give away his money? Of course, there's no, even someone who wins the lottery isn't just going to give away the money. They're going to give it to someone they feel worthy of giving it to, or they're going to spend it on something, at least in the moment, they feel important enough to spend the money on. Okay. It may rise to a different level, but therefore, when someone gives tzedakah, sure, if they give it from money they earned, it might be more painful. But even if they give it from money that came to them, it's still not easy. Again, for most people, some people are by nature, they just can't hold on to their money. But a vast majority of people, even if they like giving charity, at the end of the day, they think twice before they write the amount, right? It's still, and here, even if it might make a difference in level between money you earned and the tax return, at the end of the day, even the tax return, if no one was looking and no one knew, is there a chance that once in a while you would just keep it and not give it the check? Perhaps.
Mhm.
So it's still difficult.
but inheritance, somebody died for you to get that. You know, so I have a different feeling about inheritance, because
You might.
I lost somebody.
Right.
because That's why. I
But
got it.
the question is, would you spend the money differently than you would the money that you earned?
I give it to charity.
Okay, it's a beautiful thing. I don't think most people would just blanketly state that.
I think people would use it for special things. Like maybe, say you couldn't.
Dedicating
afford a
things-
Cruise every year and you came into this money and says, oh, I feel a little more comfortable. Let's take that cruise that we always wanted to do, and fulfill a dream or whatever.
Yep.
It is, Rick, just put that.
But at the end of the day, it's not easy. It's not easy to give the money to tzedakah. It's something that you don't necessarily see an immediate return on your investment. If there's a return, it's a mitzvah, it's the biggest mitzvah. There's definitely a return, but you don't see it in the moment. You may not see it in the moment. Some people do feel it and do see it. Okay. They tell the story of a rabbi. So in most Jewish communities, before Pesach, there's something called ma'ot chitim. You know what that means? Ma'ot chitim means money for wheat. And it's wheat.
Wait, so
Like
you
wheat,
can buy the-
flour, so you can make flour.
the matzahs.
Okay.
So the reason it's called this is because throughout history, what was the most expensive and important thing for Pesach is matzah. So when you want to make sure every Jew has matzah, but many Jews can't afford matzah, you want to give charity. But you're giving charity for the matzah. So it got the name ma'ot chitim, money for wheat. Today, obviously, it doesn't mean just wheat. if someone needs matzah, they probably need meat and wine, many other things. And it's not just Pesach, Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot too. So in most Jewish communities today, there's Ma'ot Chetim, and it goes twice a year, at least twice a year. In larger communities, it could go every Shabbos. But where you give charity, okay. So the rabbi, they told the story of a rabbi, he went to shul a month before Pesach, where he's starting Ma'ot Chetim in his community, and he's going to give a speech about anyone who needs charity and anyone who can give charity to try to put together funds to support the needy families. He comes home, his wife's like, "No, how was the speech?" She says, 50% successful. 50%, one speech, that's amazing. Which 50%? So he said, all the people that needed money came over to me afterwards to tell me that they needed money. I'm still waiting for the people that can give the money.
That's not so good.
It's 50%.
That's the 50%.
It's 50%. Okay. And by the way, this is nothing to do with religious or not. Religious people are just as different, even though a religious person is willing to give up one day of their week, not to go to work or not to earn money or not to go shopping. They're willing to give up an hour in the morning to daven and not go to work so early in the morning. We're willing to give up a lot for God. And when it comes to charity, it's still very difficult, no matter how religious you are, to give charity. Although the more religious, statistically, religious people, I think, perhaps give more charity or larger percentages, definitely, of their income. Okay, but it's difficult. So now let's understand, go back to the original question of what place does money have in Judaism? Money does not just represent our needs. It's not just something that we need. Money represents my animal soul. Because anything my animal soul wants probably needs money to get. And money can probably buy almost anything my animal soul desires, even a relationship. Because remember, as we've been discussing the last 6 weeks, relationships for the animal soul, all it cares about are relationships that will benefit it. It's willing to spend money on something that it'll get a return on. So the animal soul doesn't just need money. The money is sort of the soul of the animal soul. But we are the animal soul, and therefore it's almost like our life. That's why you can't mess around with someone else's money. That's why the Torah is very, very strict about withholding someone's paycheck. You're playing around with their soul, not with their divine soul, but with their animal soul. And the soul is that's what gives me life. That's why I'm alive. And that's why the Torah is careful even about people wasting money. It says a person not allowed to waste money. The Torah is careful about wasting money. For example, first of all, why did the Jews go to Egypt?
For the famine.
Huh?
They were forced to go.
Why? Why did God send the Jews to Egypt? Why did God tell Abraham his descendants will go into Egypt?
You say Egypt or just they'll be in bondage or whatever?
In bondage, whatever,
Okay.
in a foreign land. Why? What was the purpose? So in the covenant, it doesn't say what the purpose was. All it says is afterwards they'll go out, very wealthy. So if you read the verses, all you see is they're going to go for 400 years to a foreign land. But no, it's before they come back home. And before they settle in their homeland, they're going to be in a foreign land for 400 years and come out wealthy. Seems like the entire bondage in Egypt was to make Jews wealthy.
Thought about that.
And there are many things in Judaism that show us how much God cares. For example, when I find leprosy on the walls of my house, right? At some point, I may have everything inside, anything under the roof of the house becomes impure. At what point does everything become impure? If it's leprosy, at what point does everything become impure?
When the Kohen says it is.
When the Kohen announces this is leprosy. So if you see leprosy and you're a rabbi, you're an expert, you know this is leprosy, but you're not a Kohen, you got to call the Kohen to come and give the official diagnosis. You know what the Torah says to do before you call the Kohen? Take everything out of your house.
Oh, because it would be also contaminated.
Because if the Kohen comes and says, this is, then everything becomes impure. And the truth is, the Torah doesn't say you take everything out of the house. Because most things you can put in the mikveh and purify them. What things can't be purified?
Torah.
Clay vessels.
Yeah.
Clay vessels are the cheapest type. And the Torah says, take out the clay vessels before you call the Kohen. Torah cares about the person's
possession.
but the cheapest possessions,
Yeah.
the disposable stuff.
Well, that's what you need to eat and stuff.
Fine, but the Torah cares about that.
Yeah, but isn't it the same thing when Jacob went back across the river?
Oh, what does it say? Very good. I was going to say that.
He went back across the river
For what?
to get his little vessel.
And what does Rashi say about that?
I don't know. He
That
doesn't-
tzaddikim, I don't know, I think it's right. Maybe it's not Rashi. Tzaddikim cherish their money more than their lives. He risked his life to go back himself to get tchotchkes.
He's right. No, no.
What does that mean? A tzaddik values his money more than his life? That seems nonsensical. Why does the Torah care? Why did the Torah put us into bondage for Judah the prince, the author of the Mishnah? Says he would honor rich people. Not because they were, but because God honored them. God endowed them with money. God trusted them. So you can't. Judaism holds money in high respect because it's the life of the person. Now, when you give tzedakah, you are putting a divine energy into that money because you're using the money that's your life for a mitzvah. So now, in turn, your life that's invested in this money is now totally divine. So if you think about it, if I worked for a month, let's say I worked 20 days in the month, and I made $20,000, and I give $5,000 to charity, 5 days of my life just became divine. Literally, 5 days of my life just changed. When I worked on those 5 days, I wasn't working to benefit. I wasn't working to, obviously I was getting paid, but I wasn't working to take home the paycheck. I was working to give away the paycheck. So now think about every day, 10% of your day is going to tzedakah, at least 10%. Let's say 20%.
Yeah.
So now, every day, if you work for 5 hours, one of those hours, you're working for God. But it's not divided like that.
Yeah.
It's 20% of each moment you're working is now divine. So if you're looking to make God present in the most physical place, tzedakah accomplishes that. It can't even be compared to anything else. And here the Alter Rebbe is going to introduce us to a fascinating thing that will close the circle even more. Let's continue here. So we're at the last paragraph of 515, where he's saying that there's no mitzvah, no other mitzvah where the vital soul is closed the same way as charity. Why? For in all other mitzvot, only one faculty of the vital soul is closed. For example, faculty of action in the hand donning tefillin or holding the etrog. And even this one faculty, 516, the top.
Mhm.
And even this one faculty, the second line, even this one faculty is clothed in the mitzvah only while the mitzvah is being performed. Right? In the case of charity, however, which one gives from the proceeds of the toil of his hands, surely all the strength of his vital soul is clothed in and applied to the effort of his labor, or in any other occupation by which he earned his money, which he now distributes for charity. And again, thus, when he gives the charity this money to which he applied all the strength of his vital soul, his entire vital soul ascends to God. Hence the superiority of charity over other mitzvot. Yeah? Now you'll come and say, yeah, but I don't give charity from my earnings, which we have to. We have to give at least 10% from the earnings. But where do I give most of my charity? From the tax return. I didn't earn that. Well, technically you did.
Because you paid over.
Right. But it seems to me like free money or an inheritance or a lottery. What about that? How does my animal soul elevate it if I give that money to charity? I didn't invest my soul in that money. Yeah. So now he continues. Even he who does not earn his livelihood from his labors. By the way, do you know that even someone who collects money for charity, in other words, he's a pauper, he's a peddler, he's a beggar, he can't afford to support himself, and he needs to ask other people for charity, he also has an obligation to give charity. Perhaps not 10%, but even a poor person has an obligation to give charity.
Right, the famous line from Fiddler on the Roof. how come, last week you gave me two Kopeck, how come only one? He says, he had a bad week. He says, just because you had a bad week, I should suffer?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right?
But you know,
So,
another thing on charity, on tzedakah, the most important thing is human life, is to be able to save, if you can save a human life,
Sure.
well, that's
Like
all
saving-
tzedakah's doing, it's saving.
That's beautiful. But again, that doesn't necessarily explain why tzedakah should be comparable and equal to all the other mitzvahs combined. And it also doesn't explain what happens when the tzedakah doesn't save a human life. I'm not suggesting you should give tzedakah to save the whales. I know many Jews do this. I'm not suggesting that's a tzedakah worthy of doing. I'm not saying, but let's say someone does that. Is that not that's not saving human beings? Even tzedakah to religious life. Give tzedakah to Chabadis, you're probably not saving someone's physical life. You may eventually, because
Things
without-
money, they.
but not just that. A lot of people without purpose, without meaning, without community, unfortunately leads to terrible things today. So it actually could save someone's physical. But at the end of the day, even if your tzedakah is going to sponsor printing a Torah book or writing a Torah story, you're not saving someone's life. It's still tzedakah.
I mean, but giving to hot solid or something like that.
Okay, there it's more apparent. So you have that,
Right.
but that's an added benefit.
Correct.
Here we're talking about how can we give meaning to the actual money and the act of giving that money, regardless of where it goes to and what happens to it. Just the act of giving the money. How can we put importance into that? Because like you said, sometimes it feels good to save someone's life, but not always do you see that. When you sponsor cancer research, sure, we know that in 50 years from now, maybe something good will come out of it, maybe sooner, but right now, are you saving someone's life? No. In your lifetime,
Maybe
you don't know.
Giving blood, if you give blood.
Giving blood,
and I don't know. if
that's
blood is-
it's
money.
Is that tzedakah?
it's even more than, in other words, it's the essence of tzedakah.
And they say pint, yeah, pint will save 3 people.
But think about it. We said that damim
Yes.
is money, is blood, but it's blood. You give your blood, that's like giving money,
right,
except it's more connected to you.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
But you expended blood to get that money, to make the money, because you either physical or mental effort that took to get the money. So your blood is invested in the money. So when you give away money, you're giving your blood.
but you know, it's also interesting, before I even thought about tzedakah, I would always give money to St. Jude's, McDonald's House, and Shriners, because saving kids to me was super important. And that was before I even thought about tzedakah.
So now you can have a whole new understanding in how your tzedakah is changing the world. Not just because you're saving someone's life, you're changing God's whole purpose for existence.
So I guess one of the things that's involved in this is that the soul is being affected in many people potential by the tzedakah.
Yeah, but the most important part here is your soul, your animal soul, and the other people, it doesn't matter their soul, even their body. On the contrary, their body is physical. You want to affect their body too, because the physical is what we're trying to elevate.
Isn't there an element there of a connection with God through the tzedakah?
That's possible, but that's an added benefit. Because again, it won't necessarily be true in every tzedakah. So that becomes a secondary thing. That's not what we're looking for, so to speak. We're not looking for the brownie points. We're not looking for the reward. We're looking to give our lover what they want. God wants the physical world to become a dwelling place. That's what we want to give God. We want to give God a physical world that's full of divinity. And that's accomplished through tzedakah like no other. Okay, let's see what happens to the person who doesn't earn the money. So it's not his life that's invested in it. Even he who does not earn his livelihood from his labors, nevertheless, since he could have purchased with this money that he gave for charity sustenance for the life of his vital soul, right? He could have used this money to buy food. So he is actually giving his soul's life to God in the form of charity. Thus, charity comprises and therefore elevates more energy of the vital soul than any other mitzvah. But again, this wouldn't hold true probably for saving the whales. You gave charity to save the whales. I don't know that you can say this qualification, right? But anywhere where you're helping someone spiritually or materially, any charitable cause, you're giving your hard-earned money or money that you could have bought life with. You could have bought food with it.
Mhm.
So now listen to something amazing that the sages say in the Talmud. This is why our sages have said that charity hastens the messianic redemption. Why? Now it makes sense. Remember, when does Mashiach come? When God's purpose is fulfilled.
Right.
That's when it will be, right? When is God's purpose fulfilled? When the entire physical world becomes a dwelling place for God, becomes a home for God. How do you make the world a dwelling place for God? By giving tzedakah. So the more tzedakah we give, the closer Mashiach comes. For with one act of charity, one elevates a great deal of the vital soul, more of its faculty and powers, in fact, than he might elevate through many other active mitzvahs combined. And as mentioned earlier in this chapter, the Messianic era is a result of our efforts in purifying and elevating the vital soul. So charity, which affects this elevation in such great measure, thus hastens the redemption. Okay, I want to just finish. Now that we've extolled the virtue of charity, I mentioned at the beginning, there's another mitzvah that the rabbis say is equal to all the other mitzvahs. Torah. Okay, so obviously it depends what we're talking about because there are two sides of the coin. On one side, charity is the biggest mitzvah. On the other side, Torah is the biggest mitzvah. You know, they say this teacher couldn't stand when his kids would answer questions with it depends. It's either yes or no. It doesn't depend. So one time the one of the students asked the teacher a question. The teacher answered, it depends. So the student said, yeah, but teacher, you don't like that answer. It depends. So he said, it depends. So we know why tzedakah is the most powerful mitzvah, because it affects our ability to make the world a dwelling place for God. It elevates our animal soul in a way no other mitzvah does. What can Torah accomplish that tzedakah can't? In other words, what would be the other side of the coin? What would Torah bring to the picture that tzedakah can't?
The spiritual element.
It's raising your godly soul.
But the purpose is to elevate the animal souls. The purpose isn't to elevate the God. The godly soul is elevated.
Right.
So the purpose is to elevate the physical world. That's why tzedakah becomes so great. So if Torah is so great, it has to be related. Remember, we said, how do you know when something's important? When this is the purpose of, this is their mission. This is what they're trying to accomplish. So if Torah becomes a main event, it has to be because that helps fulfill the main goal. But we just learned that the main goal is accomplished with physical things. It seems like, right? What does Torah add to this that tzedakah sort of is lacking?
Torah is like a guidebook and maybe it's by informing our animal soul that this is the way things should be done, and it may be helpful in accomplishing that goal.
Yes, but again, that's not the purpose of our life, is not to build a relationship with God. The purpose of our life is to do what God wants, is to fulfill his desire to make this world a better place. Sure, we accomplish that through building a relationship. But again, what should we focus on? You spend a lot of time with your kids building a relationship, but is that the focus? Is that the purpose? You know what happens when a parent sees the purpose in raising their kids as building a relationship with them? They stop educating them. They stop disciplining them because that might ruin the relationship. But for many people, that's the purpose in life, to have that when I grow old, I should talk to my kids. So if I ruin any, that's not your purpose in life. Your purpose in life is to raise kids that will be able to be moral, God-fearing people. That's your purpose in life, to raise kids, good kids.
So they give tzedakah.
So they could live a life that God wants. And you don't do that by focusing on the relationship. That doesn't mean it's not important to have a good relationship with your kids. You must have a good, but again, your actions will be decided based on what the main focus, what your mission statement is. You have to have a mission statement. Your mission statement guides everything. I would be able to succeed here if I won't get people in my doors. If I take down the mechitza, I'll get many more people in my doors. But my mission statement isn't to get people in the doors. My mission statement is to bring Torah to as many people. Taking down the mechitza isn't bringing Torah to people. So but if I'm not focused on the mission, then I don't know where I'm going. And I start doing things that in the moment feel worthy or important. So, but the Torah says that Torah study is equal to all the mitzvahs combined. So Torah has to affect our ability to make a dwelling place for God in this world in a place that tzedakah lacks. Okay, so where does tzedakah lack? So tzedakah at the end of the day is an actionable mitzvah. And it's a mitzvah that the money that you made is money that was invested by your soul, by your job, everything, your whole life went into it, right? And yet, you can have someone that gives a lot of tzedakah, and or maybe even gives the most tzedakah in the world, but his way of thinking is totally opposite of what God wants. Doesn't do any other mitzvahs. He may even hurt people. He may even be a bad person. He just likes getting his name on all the buildings. So he gives a lot of tzedakah. Tzedakah, doing something can train your body, but it won't necessarily change who you are. It won't necessarily inform how you think. And by the way, how you think also affects what you do. When we study Torah, we change the way we think. I know you joined us for positivity bias, where every week for like 30 some weeks, we got together. Sometimes I'll hear from you, I'll hear from other people that were there. Till today, we'll get into a conversation that'll go sort of a negative way, and then somehow it turns back to positivity bias. The more you learn about something, your thinking starts to change. It impacts the way you think. Once your thinking changes, your behavior changes. And that's where tzedakah falls short, perhaps falls short. When the professor dies, who do you want to fill his shoes? His prodigy student or his chauffeur? But his chauffeur was much more dedicated to him. His chauffeur dedicated his life to him, knows everything about him, things the prodigy student will never know. He knows all his intimate secrets.
But he can't teach.
He doesn't know how to think like the professor. So there's a big element in tzedakah. So which one's more important? I don't know if you can say which one's more important. When you're talking about this element, then tzedakah becomes like all the other mitzvahs compared to Torah study. When you're talking about this element, Torah becomes like all the other mitzvahs compared to tzedakah. There is one time where it's very important, and that is where they can't both, one will interfere with the other. So now which one do you choose? So it depends. Usually it says that you never stop studying Torah, even to do a mitzvah like tzedakah, unless it can't be done by someone else. So if there's no one else available to help this poor person, you stop. But if there is, you don't, because someone else will do tzedakah. You'll do tzedakah afterwards. Yeah. The same thing is if someone else needs tzedakah and you say, no, I'm in the middle of studying,
No.
can't do that. So it depends, but they're equal in that way. Okay, let's see. Let's read this last part and then we'll. As for the statement of our rabbis that Torah study outweighs all other mitzvahs, including charity. How can this be reconciled with what we said before? This is because the study of Torah employs speech and thought, which are the inner garments of the vital soul, unlike action, which is external. Thus, only Torah study and not other mitzvot can suffuse the inner garments of the soul with the light of Torah. In other words, we have to elevate our animal soul, not just the action part of it, the thought and speech. And that's what tzedakah can't do. Furthermore, the very substance and essence of the intellectual faculties of Chabad, Chachma, Bina, and Das, of the Klipat Noga in the vital soul, are actually absorbed into holiness when one studies Torah with concentration and intelligence. Remember, we said the animal soul is primarily the emotions, but the animal soul also has intellect. We said it's called the vital soul or the natural soul. So how do you elevate that? That wasn't necessarily invested in the money. The money is more your emotions, your labor, your toil. How do you elevate the intellect of your animal soul? Through studying Torah. So the thought and speech of the animal soul can only be elevated through studying Torah. Although Beinanim are incapable of mastering the substance and essence of the midot, Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferet, and so on, so as to transform them into holiness, right? We will never be able to change what we love. And that's why we'll battle with our animal soul till the day we die if we're a Beinani. So we can't change that. This is because the evil of Klipat Noga is stronger in the midot than in Chabad. In other words, we can't change the way we feel, but we can change the way we think. The intellectual faculties, since on that level of midot, the Klipot, draw more vitality from holiness than they do on the level of Chabad, as is known to the students of the Kabbalah. Okay, so the point is that the emotions are more difficult to convert, whereas the intellect is easier to convert, or is possible to convert. Therefore, and therefore the Torah study fills the void of what's missing in tzedakah. Herman Wolf once told Rabbi Moshe Feller, the Rebbe's shliach in Minnesota, that he had a private audience with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him he was speaking about, he was like sort of downplaying American Jews. And American Jews are not, they're much lower than European Jews. Okay, they're more material, they're more self-centered, they're more but he's also speaking from their relationship to Judaism, feel less of a connection to Judaism. The Rebbe felt differently. The Rebbe said he holds very strongly of American Jews. The Rebbe told him in English, the Rebbe said, you cannot tell them to do anything, but you can teach them to do everything. American Jews won't listen if you tell them to do something. But if you teach them to do something, you could teach them. I mean, we Americans, we do crazy things. We spend money on crazy things. We protest for crazy things. You can convince an American, you can't convince a Russian anything. Yeah? I don't mean Russian specifically. I'm saying Americans are very, very impressionable. We can be taught anything. We can't be told anything. I said the story before about the rabbi in the shul. There's another story similar to that, where a rabbi gets up in the shul and he says, I have good news and bad news. The community, we need a bigger shul. It's going to be a $2 million project. The good news is that all the money, we have all the money. Yeah? We have all the money in this room to build a shul. The bad news is it's in your pockets. But really, the bad news is really better news. Because the fact that it's in your pockets means that you now have the opportunity to give a piece of your life, a big chunk of your life to God. If you didn't have the money, you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't, someone else would have to do it. But if you have the money in your, now you can do something that someone else can't.
I think that's the great potential right there. Sure.
So now we basically finished sort of this section. We have one more class, which next week we'll get into more in detail what happens when there's a clash between Torah and tzedakah. But we pretty much have finished this section, the chapters 35, 36, 37, where, or 36 and 37 really, where we spoke about what's we have to know the purpose, where we're going, where we're headed, what's the purpose of it all, what's the purpose of my life? Why should I dedicate myself to the first 35 chapters of Tanya? What's the point of all of it? Now we know. Why am I struggling every day with my animal soul? Because that's why you're here. You're here to struggle. If you wouldn't be struggling, you wouldn't be here.
Oh, yeah, that's true, son. You wouldn't need to.
Exactly.
So the struggle, when looked in those lenses, is bearable. It's manageable because we said yesterday, if there's a why, there's a what. If a person, that's what Viktor Frankl saw in the concentration camps, right? He saw healthy people die and sick people survive, right?
Right.
That was what he observed,
Mhm.
and he was looking for the reason. And what did he find? What was his discovery? A man searched for meaning. If someone had meaning and purpose, they were able to. This doesn't mean that the people that died didn't. A lot of people were killed. He was talking about people that sort of gave up,
Mhm.
succumbed to their illness, succumbed to the hunger. Not people that were killed. I would say they were killed also. The difference, it's a distinction without a difference. It's a difference. The point is that if a person has a purpose, yeah. Anyhow, the point is clear. It's why no one's going to not go to the doctor to avoid getting the shot, because we know the purpose. We pay the doctor to give us a shot. That's crazy. We had the video last week of the schwitz, the sauna. You pay people to slap you with the branches. Someone would do that in the street, you call 911, right?
Right.
But when there's a purpose, when there's a meaning, when there's a could you imagine what would happen if every Hebrew school kids became bar mitzvah and they knew this? They entered Jewish life, that there's a purpose, there's a meaning, whether they identified with it totally or not. The older you get, the more you study it, the more you identify with it. Could you imagine if you knew this 60 years ago?
Right.
Oh,
So now,
Different perspective on life, definitely.
so now we have an obligation. We have an obligation to exude this, to live this, and in turn influence the people around us. You can save someone's life. You can change someone's life just with a mind shift, with a